Hi, it's Anna.
And Allison.
So last week we were covering the inspection. Now we're moving on to contracts. So once you've chosen an attorney to work with, whether we've referred them to you or you've had your own, you're going to contact that attorney and let them know that you're moving forward with contracts. So the attorney that you've reached out to is going to contact you once they've received the contracts and asked you to either come in, or they'll contact you by phone now these days, where you could actually e-sign. And then you could either send the check overnight by mail, or you could wire the money. There's so many options now. And they'll go over the contracts with you. So they'll tell you, and if there's anything that you need to do, any repairs that you want done, if something came up in the inspection or whatnot, you would inform the attorney and they would put that into the contracts as well.
Yeah, so the only thing we ask, and going back to what Anna was saying, you're welcome to use whatever attorney that you would like. We just ask if they're a real estate attorney. Because we've had many instances where the buyer's aunt, uncle, brother, cousin is, a divorce attorney or an injury attorney or something like that. And, while they are able to practice real estate law, they don't know the ins and outs of what is normal versus something that is, not. So a lot of times, and we've seen this happen, they make a mountain out of molehill with something that is easily, fixable, because they don't know what is common practice. So again, while you're able to use any attorney you like, we just ask that you specialize in real estate law. And then going back a little bit to the process, when you're ready to sign contracts, the seller's attorney is the one who draws up the contracts. So they'll write them up and they'll send them over to your attorney. There's always some back and forth with little revisions and things like that. And then once everything has been ironed out is when, your attorney will call you and ask you to come in, or we'll do a teleconference or something like that, review all the contracts with you. If any additional changes need to be made, they'll, add amendments in. As Anna was saying, if anything came up in the inspection report that the sellers have agreed to take care of, they'll include that in the contracts just to make sure that it is taken care of before we close. And at that point, you will bring in your down payment check. And something to keep in mind about the down payment check is that whatever your total down payment is, a portion of it will be due on contract. So we want to make sure that whatever portion is due on contract is liquid money. It's not held up in a 401k or something like that, where it would take time for you to retrieve that money. Because typically from an accepted offer to contracts could be as little as 5 days, right. Sometimes less. So we want to make sure that that money is available. So your attorney will advise you as to how to send the down payment check, whether it be a wire or a cashier's check or a personal check. And at that time, you will give that money over to your attorney. From that point, the contracts, once you sign the contracts, they will go back to the seller's attorney, and then the seller will sign. Your down payment check will be held in the seller's attorney's escrow account until closing. And once the seller signs contracts, then we are in full contract. So at that point, nobody else can come in and outbid you, or there's no chance of somebody else stealing the house from underneath you. And then at that point, the contracts go to the lender, and then they start their process.
Going back on the down payment, a lot of people think just because they're putting 20% down, it's all due at the signing contracts. That is not actually the case. You actually just put a portion of that down, and the remainder of it gets dispensed at closing. So say you had to put $190,000 down, that's your down payment for the house. That's not all at the signing of the contracts. Only a portion of that amount would be, and then the remainder would be at the closing table.
And just to piggyback on that, there is no set amount to put down on contract. If you're putting down a large amount, we usually recommend, $25,000 down on contract, but there is no set amount, and that's something that we can discuss with what you feel comfortable with. But also to touch upon the money, the remainder of that being due at closing, that is separate from your closing costs. So at closing, the remainder of that down payment will be due along with your closing costs. And the closing costs, your lender can go over. It really depends largely on the house because there's a number of factors that go into closing costs. Obviously, the purchase price, the taxes, the recording fees, that kind of thing. So that is separate from your down payment, and that is something that you're going to need to keep in mind when searching for a home. That is another chunk of money that you're going to have ready to go at the time of closing.
Right. And later in the series, we'll be covering the closing costs and what's included in those closing cost fees, so you'll know what really to expect at that point.
So yeah, now that we have fully executed contracts, like I said, all the paperwork will go to the lender, and then they start their process. So shortly after we're in contract, an appraisal will be ordered, and that is ordered by the bank. And the purpose of the appraisal is to make sure that the house is worth at least what you are paying for it. At least that, or if not more. If the appraisal comes in at purchase price or above, then we're good. If it comes in below what you're paying for it, then we do need to renegotiate, often. So the appraisal is ordered, an appraiser comes out to the property. He takes measurements, he takes pictures, he runs comps in the area. He has the same system that we have, the same MLS, so he pulls the comps that have closed most recently, that are most similar to the home, to make sure that the value is there.
Exactly. And once they get the appraisal back, they will send a copy to the buyer, so you'll know the exact value of your appraisal on your home.
Yeah, and that's another miscellaneous fee, that's associated with the home purchase. Appraisals now run about $600 on average. Could be less, could be more, again, dependent on the lender, and they'll be able to give you a specific amount. But yeah, once the appraisal comes in, and again, if the value is at what you're paying or above, then we're good. Title is also run to make sure there's no liens or judgments against the property. So when you're purchasing a home, a title company will run the title. And you want to make sure that when you're taking possession of the home, it's free of no encumbrances on the property.
Exactly. So once you have a clear title and that, everything's looking pretty good to go. So.
And then we can schedule the closing, which is exciting. So typically we're looking, I think when I first started doing this, it was like 90 days for closing. I think now we average between like 60 and 75.
Depending if they want to get a survey sometimes.
Right.
Some attorneys will recommend a survey if they haven't had one in quite some time.
It's also dependent on the lender.
Right.
Some lenders work more efficiently than others. So going back to, making sure you're working with a reputable lender who's familiar with the local ordinances, that's very helpful. So yeah, once we get the green light with the title, and everything is set with your loan, the loan at the end of the process goes into underwriting just to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. They're probably going to ask for you to resubmit a lot of the documents that you submitted at the beginning of the process, updated pay stubs, bank statements, all that kind of stuff. They'll rerun your credit score to make sure that you haven't made any large purchases and your credit hasn't been affected negatively. And if that all checks out, then we are ready to issue the clear to close, or the lender will issue the clear to close, and then we are ready to schedule closing.
Piggybacking on what Allison said about large purchases, there are absolutely no large purchases when you're purchasing a home. You got to make sure that you're not buying any cars, not running up your credit cards,
Co-signing any loans,
anything like that, because that could all affect the purchase of your house. I've seen so many times where, not with any of my clients, I do stress this to them, but I've had other agents tell me that a couple of weeks before closing, they've had buyers that have gone out and purchased cars or purchased
furniture.
A new furniture and put it all on the
That's
credit
a big
card.
one. That is a big one, because you get wrapped up and you get excited, and so I said, I'm like, listen, I know you're excited to furnish your house, but you have to wait. I've also had clients who are simultaneously buying a house and planning a wedding
Yes.
And, you know, they've contacted me because, again, I stress it as well when we sit down. I said, listen, from this point forward, there's no big purchases, no opening any new credit cards. And thankfully, they have reached out to me because they wanted to book their honeymoon.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, is it okay if I said no? I'm like, if you could. So they ended up borrowing the money or, you know, putting it on a parent's credit card and then paid them back.
Right.
But I mean, it's things that you don't even think of that, you know, that can negatively affect your credit. And the last thing you want in the 11th hour before you're ready to close and they're running their credit again is to see your score drop, because everything is going to need to be redone at that point. So it is something very important to keep in mind.
Exactly.